Hey everybody, welcome back to the rebooted version of LA Sessions. We definitely want to thank everyone who watched the old series with me and my old co-host Cynthia Garcia. So moving forward, there's just going to be some changes. This episode is actually just going to be me. I thought I should put this out before we got the upcoming election, and I just definitely wanted to cover a couple things and just kind of go over the new format of the podcast. So moving forward, I'm going to have an ongoing rotation of co-hosts with me, and each of them, they have different expertise, different viewpoints, but they're definitely experts in their field. And I'm not just going to be bringing on mental health experts. We're going to have people from the science community, a lot of other fields as well. And, and unlike my co-host, who she and I were great friends, continue to be great friends, I've also invited some people who, in all fairness, don't really think I'm all that great. But I think that makes for an interesting dynamic, and you're going to see why it's important as we go on in this episode. Because I really feel like in these turbulent times, again, with the election coming up, a lot of people are just divided as far as who their friends are, their colleagues are, and based on what? Political affiliation, things like that. I'm not a big fan of that kind of conflict, and I've just realized that I, as a host of a podcast, should set an example. I should invite people on that have vastly different opinions of me, both as a human being and as a professional. I think it's important that viewers don't just hear two people who completely agree on everything. You know, we have to be able to have sometimes difficult conversations, difficult topics. And really, it's up to you guys as the viewer to see maybe whose viewpoint you resonate with most. And so, like I said, we're going to have a rotating group of co-hosts, and I hope you guys show them a lot of love and support as well. Each week, it's going to be somebody different until they're going to cycle back. I don't know that. I don't know that many people. So hopefully, yeah, this new show, this new format is going to be hopefully just as exciting as the old one. For anyone who watched the old series, we tried to cover an important topic that you, the public, may feel is important. It might be affecting your life. And some of it is just stuff that maybe hasn't affected your life, but it could one day. You know, we're going to be covering things like AI chatbots. We're going to be covering environmental science because there's a lot of environmental protesters lately. We're going to be covering feminist theory as well as male-based therapy, which is something I specialize in. For those of you who watch the old show, I specialize in doing therapy with men and covering men's issues. Now, and I don't do that to say or minimize the need for women's issues. It's just that I'm honest enough with myself and my clients to know that that is not my specialty, because I'm totally against specialists who just say they specialize in everything just to check off a box. I'm not a fan of that, as you probably know if you listen to the old episodes, and if you don't know, you're gonna see that in future episodes. I'm a big fan of people who stay within their scope of competence, and that's why, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be bringing on people who are specialists in their field, and so they can speak on things that I really can't. I'll have an opinion on it, but I'm not going to present myself as a specialist, and that's for your benefit. So, yeah. And as always, please feel free to message us, leave comments if there are subjects that you want us to cover, or if you have any commentary on some of the subjects that we are covering. I know, for example, some of the stuff we're going to be covering, such as like what men want, what women want. We're probably going to have a part one, part two with different speakers, because that seems to be a topic that some of the co-hosts that I've approached, there's some overlap. And so, yeah, some of those topics are going to be pretty popular, I think. And so, yeah, let's talk about this upcoming election, folks. Obviously, the last one went a little weird. People went a little bonkers on both sides. One side in particular may have overreacted on January 6th. But look, we have to be able to discuss certain things. And this includes with people we love, with people we don't love so much. And people think that Donald Trump, for example, was the reason, friends suddenly had conflict and there was this strife between family members. But the reality is, guys, I'm old enough to remember this existed way before. I mean, there are some of you who may be around my age. You remember when George W. Bush ran for president against Al Gore? People were divided then. They were saying the same things they say now, whether you loved one guy and hated the other, or you just hated them both. People said it's like Dumb and Dumber. We don't have a good candidate. And so this isn't new. People were divided, and they were, back then, social media was just burgeoning, and people were already cutting off ties with their own friends and family members because of that. It's happening now. It's just louder because there's more social media, right? So we got to be able to talk about that, you guys. We have to be able to talk about it without fear of getting our feelings hurt, without hurting other people's feelings, without feeling canceled. I mean, the truth is, if I got to be honest, it wasn't easy for me to get more co-hosts to come on, to agree to come on to this podcast. Getting them to come on and cover hard topics was difficult because these are difficult times, and it's hard to, I suppose, for some people to portray a certain image or advocate for something, but feel they were going to be judged by clients, potential clients, or other professionals. And so that's why I applaud all the co-hosts that I'm going to be having on the show, because they're not afraid to speak their truth, their opinion, because at the end of the day, no matter what your job is, you still bring a certain element of your own personality into it. Okay. Now, some of us can kind of put that on the back burner and not let it take over a session or take over our job. And I think that's fair. But we are who we are. Okay. And if we can't discuss things that we may be at odds with each other about in a meaningful, respectful way, then what are we? Then how far are we from just throwing sticks and stones at each other, right? Look, I remember a time when I started my career up in Seattle, Washington. I was a case manager in a residential facility, and I was new to the field. I was only 22 years old, but I had a lot of people that mentored me and taught me a lot, things that I still take with me to this day. But I always remember two coworkers I had. They were two older gentlemen. One was really conservative. One was very, very liberal. Fred and Steve. And I remember I learned a lot from just listening to them just go at it, about politics. And this was during the whole war in Iraq. And both men were very opinionated about it. And they got emotional. But at the end of every single spirited debate, one guy would concede to the other and say, well, you got a good point there. And then this would repeat every single day. Okay. And here I am, I'm a 22-year-old guy, and I'm watching this, and I was like, wow, these guys are doing it how it's supposed to be done. They're not pointing, yelling, screaming, and name calling, and just swearing they're never going to speak to each other again. No, it was done in a respectful way, and both were educated men who had experienced a lot. And I learned a lot from them, and I took that with me ever since, because I have colleagues and friends that we differ. We differ on things. I have a brother who's in the military. We differ on a great number of things, but I never question his expertise. Okay. And we happen to overlap on a lot of things too. But we can talk about that and we can admit it. And we're never going to not love each other. We're going to be brothers for life. That's how it goes. I'm not going to cancel him because he thinks a certain way. And he's certainly not going to kick me out of his life because I think a certain way. We're going to think of the things we have in common, that we believe in common. We're going to respect the things that we don't, because at the end of the day, are the things that we disagree on, like, do they weigh more heavily than our relationship? I don't think so. And he doesn't think so. So, yeah. We live in some turbulent times, guys, where we as people need to fall back on things other than a singular identity. And I know it's hard to do that during an election year where someone might think, my identity right now is I'm a MAGA Republican, or I'm a far left leaning progressive. And that's it until election day. And I applaud people who are very spirited about their beliefs. But I worry about people who let it completely occupy their identity because they have nothing to fall back on. And then they're going to be the ones that on election day, when their person doesn't win, they're going to be like the next meme, the next crying meme, you know? And I don't want to see that for people. And likewise, let's be real. Sometimes your person's going to win and you're still going to find a reason to be upset because you're going to think, well, they won, but they're not doing enough. Okay. And how healthy is that? Okay. And I just ask, at the end of the day, if that is enough to completely derail your life and just ruin your very existence, then I think it's safe to say you need more purposes in life. Nothing ever said a person can only have one purpose. You can have a lot of different purposes. We live in an age where people identify as a lot of things. So why not identify as a lot of things? Why not? If you're a family person, okay, you can be progressive, you can be Republican. Maybe identify as a loving parent, a loving partner, a loving friend, a great coworker, things like that. So you have things to fall back on. I find it weird sometimes that people who have families get so stressed out and feel like they don't have options and choices during election years. And I'm thinking, well, you have your family. And regardless of who's elected, whether it's president, Congress, Senate, you have your family and they depend on you for strength. So identify as someone who's strong. You have more options, you're going to be happier in life. Okay. Think of like maybe the worst coworker you ever had, the one who's just miserable, just Captain Miserable all day. Everything sucks. They could literally get a bonus and they'd still find a reason to complain, right? Well, you're going to probably find out that they don't have choices in life. They need that job. They can't go anywhere else. Okay. And no choices makes for a miserable person. And you yourself might be someone who's like, I have choices. I'm great at my job, but they don't appreciate me. I don't get paid enough. I can up and leave. I can go to the competitor. I can go to, a different state, even whatever, but you have choices. And so when you have choices, you don't have to take any shit, pardon my French. You can do what you want. Your person doesn't win an election. You're just like, whatever. And for those of us who live in California, like me, in addition to paying ridiculously high taxes, we got to be honest. How affected are we by who's in the White House? California is its own state, but it feels like its own country. We're certainly big enough to be. And if you're being honest, Northern California and Southern California feel like they're different states. So do you really get affected that much? And before you say, well, no, but I care so much about this and about this movement and that movement, I commend you, but sometimes as a mental health professional, I have to work with people to unlock their core needs. Why do you feel this way? Why do you want to move in this direction? Is it just the politics? Is it just that? What is the underlying belief there that is causing you to feel a certain way? It's the same as when a couple feels like their relationship is at the end, it's at the end of its marriage cycle or whatever. It's wasn't just one thing. It's several things that lead up to it. We got to be able to talk about those things. Talk about what is it that's bothering you? What is at the bottom of these strong beliefs that you have? And that's something I hope we can cover in our future LA Sessions podcast episodes with the professionals that I have on. And I hope we can take a deep dive. That's why we're going to pick certain topics. We're going to present as much as we know in terms of facts. Like, for example, we're going to have environmental science, and I'm bringing on a colleague of mine who is very well decorated in the science community to go over certain things, and I can kind of chime in with the mental health aspect of it. All right. So yeah, we're going to have that, but we're going to have people who are going to have different political beliefs than you, different beliefs than me. I'm going to have on people who have different mental health modalities the ones they use different modalities than me. Their go-tos are maybe different than mine. People in my practice know that I use cognitive behavioral therapy and solutions focused primarily. I'll hop on and do Gestalt if needed, but those are my core two. But we have others that use more narrative therapy, person-centered therapy. Not my bag, but I respect it. But it's not for me to judge. It's for you guys to see, well, maybe I resonate more with this co-host than I do with Bryan. And that's fine. I might have someone on. Well, I'm hoping to have people on that probably don't have a high opinion of me, and that's fine. But I think that's what we need. We need that more in this country for two people who are not like-minded to be able to talk about things, right? In therapy, we always try to help couples, for example, to have difficult conversations. People who know me know I'm a big advocate of prenuptial agreements, for example. Probably one of the more awkward conversations a couple can have, right? But it doesn't have to be. I mean, it doesn't have to be a negative conversation. It could be a very positive one, depending on how you approach it. But that's what I'm talking about. Being able to have difficult conversations, being able to communicate, right? So yes. And like I said, you guys have topics you want us to cover, please send them in. We will try to do our best. I'll still try to meet every other week with my co-host so that we can get material out semi-regularly. It's going to be a challenge with multiple co-hosts, but the good thing is I've already got several episodes lined up, so we should be good in the initial going. And I hope if you're going to continue to listen to our content, I hope you're someone who does value freedom of speech. Because like I said, I want to have a multitude of co-hosts on that don't feel like they have to censor what they say. I don't ever feel like I have to censor myself. People who know me know I'm gonna say stuff. Some of it's gonna be profound, and some of it's probably gonna be pretty crazy. I mean, like we're talking like Naked Gun or Airplane crazy. Like it's gonna be wild, but that's what I do. Okay, and I speak as someone who's had content taken down before by certain platforms. I'm not going to say what because they probably control my my streaming as we speak. But it is what it is. I don't like it. I don't want that to happen to anybody, regardless of whether I agree with them or not, because that's not the country my parents fled Vietnam to. That's not it. Okay. And in our therapy field, I got to be honest, it's pretty bad too. I mean, I'm just glad that as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I'm not governed by the American Psychology Association, because the APA's got some wonky guidelines that psychologists have to follow, and I can't get on board with that. And I know I'm not the only one, because I know there are certain male psychologists, rather, that specialize in men's issues that definitely don't agree either. They're fighting the good fight on behalf of men's issues. And I definitely respect them. And I just don't want to be put in a situation where I have to muzzle myself for the detriment of the clients I work with. It's like I mentioned before, my specialty is in working with male clients. And my male clients wouldn't want me to be muzzled in any way. They don't want me to stay silent on certain things. They want me to be able to speak on issues that affect them. Things like family court, things like depression in men. Okay. Things like, some men have certain health issues that come with getting older. Dating is a big one. It's hard for men to date. I mean, let's be real. I mean, therapy for men, when you break down the reasons men come in, you cut through all the superficial stuff. It really comes down to two things. I need to meet women, or I need to make more money. That's what it always generally comes down to. Okay. So there you go. I don't know if therapy geared towards women is any different. I'd love for people to chime in, especially my female colleagues, but that's just what it is. So yeah. And the men that come to therapy with me tend to favor a purpose-driven approach. They want me to help them find their purpose. Okay. And that's how we do it. That runs contrary. That kind of straightforwardness runs contrary to some of my colleagues and how they do therapy. And that's fine. But that's why I want this to be an outlet for many of my colleagues to come on. And so listeners might feel like, I resonate more with her or with him than with Bryan. And that's fine. It helps you to see as a service recipient what you would want. Okay. And that's all I want. I want our field to do better. I want our clinicians to be honest about who they can work with and what their specialties are. And I want potential therapy recipients to know what's out there, so they're not just stuck with an in-network therapist that they just picked out of a directory, that just happened to be in their zip code. And not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying people should be matched up. I mean, if you go on dating apps to try to get matched up with the right person, I think it stands to reason that you should be matched up with the right clinician. I mean, it's only your mental health at stake, right? So, and I want this to be a platform, like I said, for my colleagues, my co-hosts to come on and just be able to be themselves and be comfortable without judgment. Look, the cost of freedom of speech, it's always been high, okay? And it's one that I'm willing to pay. And if I'm the only therapist, then so be it. But I'm willing to bet I'm not the only one. Yeah, I ripped that from Captain America. Okay, yeah, so sue me. And so this is not going to be a long episode, you guys, because it's just me. I don't have a co-host to bounce ideas off of and to hear out. It's just me ranting. This is completely unscripted, but I wanted to put this out before the election. And I want to close out by just saying, regardless of who your person is, whether it's Harris, Trump, have a fallback. Okay, don't make this the only thing that's gonna affect your happiness. Okay, work on yourself. All right, because this having a candidate you rally behind is one thing, but if your happiness is entirely dependent on who's going to be sitting in the big chair next year, then I got news for you. That might be indicative of a bigger problem, because then you might be someone who's prone to letting one person control a lot of your happiness. You might be someone who is overly dependent on, I don't know, maybe a friend, a partner, and you make them your sole source of happiness, which is always a bad idea. Okay? I always tell my male clients, in addition to having a purpose-driven identity, it is very, very important for men to form a tribe of men that support each other. They don't have to be exactly alike. In fact, it's better that they're different. But they can rely on each other. They can uplift each other when one of them's down. Okay, you got to keep the tribe strong. And in times where one of them might be overly dependent on, on their partner, on, again, like a political figure, the other's got to be able to jump in and say, you're more than just some ideology. You got other things. And I would say in this situation, if you're listening, if you know someone that fits that description, where they're just so much of the personality is tied to an ideology or something like that, maybe it's time to jump in, remind them why you're their friend, and show them there is more to life than just that. Your mental health is, it's one of the most important things in your life. I mean, it's up there pretty close with your physical health. Okay, you got to be sound mind and body. Okay, and you're not going to be that if you're just going to stress out about every little thing. Okay, and try to practice resilience is one of the things you want to try to identify with, because and look, I know a lot of my colleagues will push back on this, but I don't really care. I've never lived in a time where resilience was almost seen as a bad thing, where identifying yourself by your strength of character, your perseverance, resilience, was almost secondary to just externalizing all of your problems. And you just got to ask yourself, is that what you would teach your kid? For those of you who have kids, or let's say you don't have kids, but you want kids, and then one day you listen to your child and they just are complaining about how life is unfair, life is unfair. Are you just going to tell them, yeah, just deal with it, life sucks? Or are you going to actually teach them a better way? Like, resilience is usually a better way, okay? People who are immigrants know this very, very well. You come to this country, you don't speak English, a lot of the time anyway. You can't work right away. It's difficult. But what are you just going to say, this is unfair and the whole country needs to change for me? The country is going to change a little bit. It always does. But you have to change too. If you want to work, like in, for example, customer service, yeah, you're going to have to learn the English language. I mean, is it fair? I don't know, not for me to say. If you're going to work in labor, you're going to have to learn to use your hands. You're going to have to learn a trade. Okay. That's how life goes. You got to level up. That's probably, I would assume, what you would tell your children. So maybe you should try that too. Just a thought. So this is it, folks. This is all I got for today. I hope I didn't bore anybody to death. I guarantee future episodes will be much more exciting because I will have a co-host. So it's not just going to be me blabbering on for like 30 minutes. Okay. Thank you for anyone who's listened. And I hope you'll join me on this rebooted version of LA Sessions. So thank you for tuning in to episode 0. Everybody, be safe, have a great week, and just remember, regardless of what happens on election day, life goes on, and so will you. Catch you next time.